So we've played Nightreign now for nearly 100 hours, and I think I've tested pretty much every Ash of War that's available in the game. And I've tested every Ash of War with every relic that powers it up. And I can categorically say that so far, the best Ash of War in the game, without a doubt. I'm going to pause the video here because I want you to comment what you think it is before I go any further.
Who's that?
Ash of War!
It's...
That's right, you probably guessed it, it's Hoarfrost Stomp. Now, it's not only because it does insane damage, which it does, early game especially, if you're using Hoarfrost Stomp, pretty much every enemy is going to die in 1L2 because the Frost proc is going to kill them. But even for bosses, like early bosses like the one I'm fighting here now, you can literally just stand afar, press L2, and you're going to beat the boss within, 10, 20 seconds or whatever it is. But let's go even further. So not only does it do insane damage, it also is an insanely good tool to take out groups of enemies when you're playing solo. Now, everyone knows that the #1 enemy in Elden Ring Nightreign is time. It's battling against time to get to where you need to go, to get decent equipment, to get a decent level before you get to the first day boss, the second day boss, and then obviously the Night Lord at the very end. Now, if you're using Hoarfrost Stomp, you can literally run up to a group of enemies, click L2, and you're taking out a whole group. You're taking out the group, you're getting 5,000 runes, but not only are you getting a shed load of runes every time you use it against a group of enemies, it also does insanely low FP cost, which means it's a viable option on pretty much every character, with the outliers being maybe Raider and maybe Guardian. For Raider, it's definitely going to be his FP. He, has very low mind because he's an Unga Bunga Chad. Unga Bunga Chads don't need mind, we just Unga Bunga. Now, for the Guardian, it's not because I don't think it wouldn't be a viable option, because it clearly is a viable option. Mostly because it scales from strength and intelligence, I believe, like the old game did. So it's still going to do damage on anyone who's got fairly decent strength, fairly decent intelligence, or anyone who's got obviously both of them. The reason I say it's not really a viable option is because the Guardian already has his special ability, which is a whirlwind that takes out a group of enemies at one time. So yeah, obviously a viable option. The Guardian has his own options, which is the Whirlwind, which will take out a group of enemies anyway. So yeah, you probably don't need to use it on someone like the Guardian. Now, to counter that, because we always want to counter the arguments, we always want to see it from both sides. The amount of buffs, or the amount of benefits you can get from frostbiting someone in Elden Ring Nightreign is incredible. Now, just to mention a few of the buffs, you've got the one where once an enemy is frostbitten, you turn invisible, as you can see here with the Revenant. That's an insanely strong thing to use for someone like the Revenant. Go invisible, move to the side, use some form of sorcery or some form of incantation, or even use your harp to call one of your family. It just gives the Revenant another option to make her a viable character, especially for solo, because me personally, I find Revenant really difficult to use in solo. I just think she's lacking in so many departments, other than damage, of course. But, the damage, you only really get the damage output when you actually find a decent weapon of hers, which is normally later on in a run. So, obviously, you got the going invisible, stuff like that. You've got the buffs where you can actually raise your attack power when the enemy is frostbitten. Now, one caveat to these is the buffs don't tend to turn on if you kill the enemy with frostbite, which when you're using something like Hoarfrost Stomp, you're going to kill most enemies, so you're not really going to get that buff. But obviously, it comes in handy later on when you're fighting bosses. Now, the one thing I will say with something like Hoarfrost Stomp, if you're using it to fight a boss, always make sure you've got some form of fire, because you want to remove the Hoarfrost Stomp, you want to remove the frostbite to be able to proc the frost again on the boss, and that way it gives you essentially way more damage, way more DPS when using something like frostbite or Hoarfrost Stomp. So yeah, it's very strong, it's good for crowd control. It will obviously debuff the enemies or the bosses that you're fighting, because that's what frostbite does, it lowers their defenses and stuff. So it's definitely something that's very viable to use in pretty much every scenario. Now, the only cons that I can find with Hoarfrost Stomp, and there's not many, in fact there's hardly any at all, it really is a powerful Ash of War without weaknesses, is the stamina it takes to use it. Now again, it's not really a con, because you don't want an Ash of War that does minimal stamina, so you can just spam the Ash of War and run away without any negative consequences. So it's probably more balanced, but in the terms of using the Ash of War, I would say that's a con. Now, the second con, and the only con that I could find outside of the stamina, was the Hoarfrost Stomp itself has quite a slow recovery. So if you're using it against bosses and you're spamming it and you're not really paying attention to how the boss is jumping towards you, you're probably going to get caught out. And if you are using it for someone like the Duchess or the Revenant, unless you're quite end game, you're probably going to be one shot and you will die. So just be mindful of when and where you're using it because of the slow recovery time. Cons aside, this leads me on to my final point, and I believe this is probably the strongest way to use it in the game, and that is within a trio. So not only does it allow you to provide insane range damage, because obviously you're already getting the damage from the Hoarfrost Stomp, and then if you proc the actual Frost, you get an insane DPS like that. If you've got one of your teammates that's using fire, you can constantly repeat that insane damage process. But not only can you do insane damage from range without even being pressured, you can also use it to revive your friends, your teammates. So yeah, as you can see, Hoarfrost Stomp, it is very versatile. You can pretty much use it in every scenario. So it works really well as a trio. So to finish off the video, my overall thoughts on Hoarfrost Stomp is it's not even close. There isn't another Ash of War that just has as many options as the Hoarfrost Stomp does. Obviously, there's arguments for things like Flaming Strike because of the amount of poise damage it will do against the boss. And if you're doing solo runs and you're, not trying to take out loads of groups at a time, you just focus on big enemies, things like Flaming Strike and stuff like that might just be a little bit better. But personally, I still think Hoarfrost Stomp has the edge over Flaming Strike, Eruption, pretty much any kind of Ash of War that you would think about using in a solo run. So gamers, let me know what you think of Hoarfrost Stomp. Let me know if you do think it's the quote-unquote meta right now. What other Ash of Wars have you been using that you think are just as powerful as Hoarfrost Stomp? And obviously, if you got this far, feel free to hit the like, the follow, the subscribe button. That does help me out massively, you absolute chads. And I will catch you on the next one. Big love, peace.